actually don't have access to my money anymore. So there's, 30,000 acres in Iowa that I technically own, but I'm driving a Toyota because I can't actually get to any of that money. So I have seen that happen occasionally where I'd say if it's stuff that's irrevocable in these tax structures, just take a couple beats and decide is in some ways, especially if you're building a technology company, you probably have an engineering mindset. Most people have some sort of toy they buy, like, okay, maybe this is not me. I'm not a car guy at all. But if you're a passionate car guy and you spend $250,000 on your Ferrari, that's 1% of your net worth. Like, that's fine. You can buy the Ferrari. It's a dumb decision, but it's not really going to hurt you any to make that dumb decision. Or, maybe you pay off your mortgage. Again, that's not an optimal decision long-term. If you've got a 2% mortgage, you ought to hold on to it. But if you're more comfortable just paying it off, again, that's not a big mistake in the scheme of things if it makes you happier. I'd say the only real, serious mistake I've seen people make that is hard to come back from is too quickly over optimizing for some sort of tax structure. And, one would be, I have this really, I heard Bill Gates does this complicated land investing. And if I put in this trust, that's then 100-year trust, my grandkids can get it, et cetera. I'm going to, really put one over on the IRS and I never have to pay taxes. And then all of a sudden they realize, well, I actually don't have access to my money anymore. So there's, 30,000 acres in Iowa that I technically own, but I'm driving a Toyota because I can't actually get to any of that money. So I have seen that happen occasionally where I'd say if it's stuff that's irrevocable in these tax structures, just take a couple beats and decide is in some ways, especially if you're building a technology company, you probably have an engineering mindset. You're an optimizer. You can do the spreadsheets, but is really optimizing to drive your tax bill down to zero? Is that really the most important thing to you versus what you're giving up in flexibility? And, speaking personally, I feel like somebody has to pay the taxes. So if the government gets a little bit of it, that doesn't kill me in order to maintain that flexibility. And then the other, I think, challenge if you get too creative on taxes is I think it can be tempting to say, okay, well, some accountant is pitching this tax deal to me, so it's probably fine if he's pitching it. Again, for the U.S., it's the IRS here. That is not a defense of the IRS of some lawyer told me it was okay and some accountant told me it was okay. If you did something that violated tax law, which I have seen a surprising number of creative structures pitched to very smart people that they just assume are kosher because it got pitched to them, and then they end up in. You're probably not going to go to jail if you listen to somebody over it, but you're going to owe a massive amount in penalties and fees if you do something just because you sort of blindly followed the advice. So that would probably be my only thing, is not to get too passionate about tax savings.
Well, one of the questions that I wanted to ask that comes to mind is, wealth advisors, right? And I mean, I don't want to say that a wealth advisor is a salesperson, but there's all sorts of different flavors out there. Yeah. And so can you name some red flags that someone, might be, what questions should they ask to make sure that a wealth advisor is a fiduciary rather than a salesperson? Yeah.
A couple of thoughts. So red flags, to me, far and away, the number one red flag is if somebody pitches some version of permanent life insurance to you. That is a very high commission product that, especially for somebody who's very high net worth, if you have $20 million, you're not really worried about, if I get hit by a car, will my family be okay? Your family will be fine. They'll be very sad, but financially your family will be fine. So somebody who is pitching whole life insurance, variable annuity, something like that, almost certainly is looking out for their bottom line rather than yours. I will give a mandatory caveat, at least again in the US context, something called private placement life insurance. That can have very specific use cases that are actually attractive, but that's not typically where you're going to see pitched. Again, whole life, VUL, indexed, universal, stay away from those and stay away from whoever tried to sell that to you.